Chapter 605, The Seemingly Familiar Nightmare. Any magician who spent some time at the ancient capital would know that the skeletons were scarier than the zombies. Their bones were hard as iron, and their strength was enough to tear a living human to pieces. Most terrifyingly, they were a lot harder to kill than zombies. It appeared that shattering them was not effective either, as they would soon assemble their bodies again using any bone for the same joint they could find on the ground. Such white skeletons were exactly the creatures that Wang Meng's squad had encountered. They had even blasted the skulls off the skeletons more than once, yet these undead simply picked up someone else's head, screwed it onto their body, and moved toward them again. Damn it! We shouldn't have stepped out of that zone. The army has already gone back to the walls, while we who came to escort them are trapped here, cursed a magician with a caved-in nose. Hold on, it's almost daytime. We'll be able to head back soon, said Wang Meng. When the day comes, I'll go home straight away, take a nice little hot shower, and sleep for 2 days straight. Where's Xiao Ding? Where did he go? Asshole, I told you all to look after him, cursed Wang Meng instantly. Wang Meng looked over the walls of skeletons and discovered a corpse whose limbs, head, and body were separated. The corpse was being trampled continuously by the skeletons. Even his head was kicked back and forth between their feet. The head was Xiao Ding's. Wang Meng's face fell incredibly white after seeing it. He already promised his wife that he would take good care of her brother, yet he had only dropped his guard down for a moment, and her brother had ended up like that. His wife would faint instantly when she saw him like this. Li Kong is also, damn it, why is it still not daytime yet? Shouldn't these undead be going back to their tombs already? I'm going to dig their graves out, snapped the man with the caved-in nose furiously. The day. A magician whose hair was dyed black and brown suddenly glanced into the east with a blank face, as if he had entirely lost his soul. Clench your teeth and hold on for a little longer. The day has come, it's already daytime. Don't get crushed by the door when you've already made it to the gates of hell, yelled Wang Meng. They could not give up like this. Otherwise the entire squad would be wiped out. It would only take a matter of seconds for the skeletons to kill them all. Asshole, what are you still waiting for? Quickly cast a light protection to help the others. Even if it means sucking your brain juice dry, do you want to die here? Yelled the man with the caved-in nose. The magician with black-brown hair pointed to the east. Captain, said the man with black-brown hair in a trembling voice. Shut up. You too. The day, it's already bright, the man pointed to the sky at the faint light, where they could also see the light drizzle. What did you say? Both Wang Meng and the man with the caved-in nose yelled in disbelief. A rusted sword suddenly swept past, separating the black-brown-haired man's head from his body. The head made a few spins in the air before falling to the muddy ground. The mud on the ground dyed his hair again, yet his face did not show any reaction to the sudden death. It was still filled with disbelief. He could not believe that the undead were still around when sunlight had already come. It's really daytime. Wang Meng stood there like an empty shell. The sinister white skeletons were still everywhere. Not only was there light, but the day was bright enough for him to see their surroundings clearly, yet the undead showed no sign of retreating. Why is this happening? The man with the caved-in nose stared at the surrounding undead with a dispirited expression. Everyone thought the fighting would come to an end when daytime came. Some even thought of how they would enjoy things after going back to the city, yet it turned out that even the sunlight they worshipped the most had abandoned them. It simply threw them into a deep abyss of no return, one that they would never climb out of. Oh! Cries of agony came from different directions. Fresh blood stained the white bones of the skeletons, granting them an eerily evil look. Wang Meng turned around and discovered the man who was grumbling about going home to take a hot shower had been cut in half. His body was chopped in half by a skeleton general with an axe. Even though Wang Meng had gotten used to witnessing deaths, his scalp still turned numb when death was only inches away. The sky was bright. It was really daytime. Why aren't the undead leaving yet? They had never heard of undead being active in the day for thousands of years. Why were the undead still able to move freely and kill his men under the sunlight? A rusty sword slashed down, followed by many other bone swords, chopping apart Wang Mang and the remaining members of his squad. Each of them was wearing a blank face, as they still did not understand what was happening even as death came. The rain continued to fall, diluting the blood and forming streams of crimson flowing across the muddy land. The undead stepped on the pools of blood. The land covered in fresh blood was like a soft, bright carpet welcoming them. It was simply so marvelous and fascinating, so they continued to cut the dead men open, to make the river of blood even more glittering. The dawn had arrived, yet the clouds and the rain had made everything dull. Despite that, the night had still come to an end. Daytime had come. It was now dawn, the time when the fighting was supposed to come to an end. The bell chime was already echoing in the city. Residents were filling the streets in their daily routines, assuming that the tall walls and the sunlight would protect them from the terrifying undead, yet little did they know, the undead had not left the walls. They were still out there, with eyes emitting vicious glints of light. The long walls were dozens of kilometers in length. When the bell chimes sounded and the sunlight appeared, the guards who were tense for the entire night finally felt relieved after surviving the night. However, when they turned around and looked at the land that was supposed to return to calm, they shockingly discovered that the nightmare was not over. The number of undead trying to run the walls down did not decrease, but increased instead. Can anyone tell me what the heck is going on here? Zhu Meng, whose wounds were still being treated, rushed down the stairs. He stared at the undead that were still around despite the presence of sunlight in great astonishment. Advisor Zhu, Yao Nan, and the commanders were in the tower, too. Their eyes were filled with astonishment and fear. They could no longer understand the scene before them with common sense. The undead. The whole land was full of undead, surging toward the walls like a black tide. Danger was imminent. Sunlight shone down upon the place as the rain continued to fall. No one had seen undead being active in the daytime for the past 1,000 years. Why were they now able to move freely and kill under the sunlight? I told you, I don't like rain. Mo Fan observed the city and the land wet from the rain. The scene was very familiar. Just like Bo City where he grew up, the scariest nightmare was really happening again. Chapter 606 City of Undead, Purple Alert. Isn't it over yet? Commander Lu Shu landed on the tower. His eyes were completely bloodshot. His right arm was missing. Fresh blood from the cut stained the white cloth wrapping around it. He was supposed to wear a twisted smile, yet the smile he hid under his skinny face was gone, replaced by the terror and disbelief of finding that he had not woken up from the nightmare. Chief Military Instructor Fei Zhao, Senior Hunter Du Xiao, Commander Lu Shu, and Councilman Zhu Meng, 4 super magicians, were looking at the land lit up by the sunlight, at the undead that were still perfectly fine in the light, while more of them violated their common sense as they burst out from the ground, acting as if the dark, bloody feast had just begun. A cry like a death knell came from the direction of the northern walls. The 4's gaze passed through the drizzle and saw a giant creature with large skeletal wings flying towards them from up close to the clouds. It grew bigger as it approached the walls. Its size was comparable to the tower on the northern walls. When its wings were fully extended, they produced a huge shadow, looming over a place like a cloud. People had no idea what it was, but when its eyes glanced at the tiny walls and humans in the city, terror began to spread rapidly like a plague, instantly covering half of the city north. Mo Fan looked up in astonishment. The bone-winged creature's body looked like it was molded from mercury, clearly visible even when the creature was still miles away. It felt like even the smallest bone with a pointy end could easily puncture every magician on the walls. Nether Bone Ruler, Commander Lu Shu finally uttered slowly after some time. Even as a super magician, he still felt a chill running down his spine when he mentioned the name, let alone seeing the scariest ruler of the undead known with his own eyes. The Phantom Tyrant Emperor was a phantom, the ruler of the phantoms. Whenever it appeared, it would have lots of phantoms surrounding it. The Nether Bone Ruler was a skeleton, a ruler of the skeletons. It was a super undead even more infamous than the Phantom Tyrant Emperor. Why? Why did it wake up in the daytime? With a roar like a death knell, the Netherbone ruler came to a stop a few kilometers away from the walls, floating in the air. The primary head out of its three was raised up high. Through the gaps between the bones around its throat, people could see black energy flickering inside its mouth. The sharp glow turned into a blast wave. The black death ray shot forward with a howl. Space began to tremble. The death ray traveled perfectly straight through the rain and the area outside of the walls. In just a few seconds, the blast wave struck the wall a kilometer to the left of the tower. Darkness spread on its surface and devoured the sunlight. The northern walls turned dark gray where the death ray made contact with them, and in the next second, the sturdy rocks were entirely devoured by the darkness. It was a sound so loud that everything simply turned deadly quiet. Mo Fan was overwhelmed by the silence, yet his eardrums were on the verge of bursting from the vibrations. The death ray had taken away everyone's sight. They only knew that the giant walls were eaten away by something right before the darkness blinded them. The darkness did not last for long. When the light finally returned, the people on the tower reacted as if their souls were destroyed. With blank faces, they simply could not believe what they were seeing. The walls had disappeared. A huge section of the walls that was previously standing there like a mountain range had disappeared. Tiny particles like dust slowly rose into the air, like wisps of floating steam. The truth was, the walls did not just disappear, but they were turned into the tiny particles that were so light that they simply drifted into the air as the wind blew. Asshole. In the tower, a line of tears ran down the cheeks of a man who was covered in dust. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to fucking kill it. He ran out like he had gone mad, screaming in a hoarse voice. When Mo Fan saw the man was seriously charging out of the tower, he immediately appeared beside the man with fleeing shadow and grabbed onto him tightly. Are you trying to kill yourself? You're just a cockroach that can be killed with a single stomp by it, snapped Mo Fan. Don't you fucking worry about me, let go, yelled Shorty. Mo Fan was clearly aware that Shorty was just going to get himself killed going down the tower. He cast Giant Shadow Spike and restrained him close to the railing on the walls so the man would not do anything stupid. Shorty was still struggling. He even tried to overcome Mo Fan's Giant Shadow Spike with his will. Yet Mo Fan's Giant Shadow Spike was not something that could be easily overpowered, at least not when Shorty was not using any effective methods. Let go of me, I'm begging you, let me go, yelled Shorty at the top of his voice. Mo Fan stood there and remained silent. Maybe Shorty did not mention anything, yet Mo Fan could easily tell from his extreme sorrow that there was a hospital close to the part of the walls that was destroyed. The death ray did not just destroy the wall. It also bulldozed the section from the wall to the hospital, like an enormous beast trampling across the place mercilessly. The wall had disappeared. The street had vanished, including the hospital, and Shorty's wife who was in labor. Mo Fan, I'm begging you, let go of me. If you still think me as your friend, pleaded Shorty sorrowfully in tears, as he knew he could not break free from Mo Fan's spell. I never thought of you as a friend, either. Mo Fan would not withdraw the Giant Shadow Spike. Even Zhu Meng, Du Xiao, Lu Shu, or Fei Zhao had no chance of stopping the death ray. Shorty would only add himself to the list of casualties. Perhaps adding one more death to the street that had now turned into dust would make no difference, but there were many things that an intermediate magician could still do. It was no longer a nightmare, but a real disaster, just like what had happened to Bo City. Back then, any intermediate magician was extremely important. Although an intermediate magician could not turn the tables, they could still save a few lives. An eerie purple glow arose slowly. It gradually loomed over the northern part of the city. Girls with special taste seemed to favor purple, thinking that the sight of a whole area covered in purple would be dazzling. But they would have to think twice about what they wished for, as the purple currently looming over the area was just a pleasing illusion right before death arrived. It would simply be their last desire in the world, before all hopes were lost. Purple. A purple alert. Mo Fan glanced into the distance. He could only see the buildings and streets in a square layout beyond, the area covered in the nightmarish purple. Chapter 607 Giant Ruler, the Mountain Zombie. The purple of death loomed over every corner in the city. Some old folk who had just woken up at dawn rubbed their eyes and said with a smile to his neighbor, "Hey old shoe, I don't think I have many days left. My eyes are going nuts early in the morning." However, seeing that the old man next door also had a terrified look, the old man that had just woken up immediately realized something. The kids who had yet to reach the age to go to school were crying. The adults simply ignored their cries and carried on with their routines. However, they discovered that the street just 2 blocks away had completely vanished. Not long afterwards, a purple glow descended from the sky. Their faces were completely blank, like never before. The teenagers who had gone to bed late rolled over in their beds, trying to get back to sleep. In the end, they finally ran out of patience and opened their windows to check on what was going on out there. They simply saw purple and people running in its light. Cars jammed the streets. People abandoned their cars and ran on foot. Officials in uniforms were evacuating the civilians. Their first reaction was wondering whether they were having a dream, but when countless calls started ringing on their phones, they were thunderstruck. Purple, the alert that even the old folks who had spent half a century living in the ancient capital had never seen before. A new day was being welcomed with a boundless aura of death. Up on the tower, Mo Fan heard cries of the undead in the distance. They were more shocking than those emitted that night. Beside him, Shorty, who had finally calmed down, dropped to his knees. Tears ran down his cheek as he cried in grief. He was sobbing and mumbling, like he was seeking Mo Fan's comfort. "I was at the hospital last night. I heard that it was the best hospital for women in childbirth. I saw the gathering signal from the window, that's why I'm here. Normally, I wouldn't come, but I thought that when it all comes to an end, I can tell my son that on the day he was born, his dad was so brave, but now, it's all gone." "He might be a daughter," said Mo Fan, who was the worst when it came to comforting people. "Shut the fuck up," yelled Shorty. "Maybe they are not dead. Maybe she had premature labor, and they went home earlier, since we were fighting for such a long time," added Mo Fan. The words barely calmed Shorty down. The whole tower was exhausted. Everyone had just gone through a great victorious fight that they assumed would surely be recorded in the history of mankind. However, what followed it was despair crashing down on them like a tsunami. No one knew what they should do, be it protecting the walls that were already blasted open, or leaving with the civilians that were clumped together like porridge in a pot. Beyond them, the undead outnumbered the living several times over. They were no longer roaming aimlessly, but advancing like an ocean. A massive skeletal creature with bone wings was circling around in the sky, glancing down at the city that it could easily annihilate like ants. Humans were too petty in its eyes, it could even eliminate magicians with ease. It let out a roar from high in the sky, commanding the undead to rise from their graves. Their sinister white bones were everywhere. In the far distance, an enormous zombie like a mountain appeared out of nowhere among the sea of undead. The quake produced from each step it took spread all the way to the city. The city walls that were as sturdy as a steel barrel were trembling under its footsteps. The mountain zombie was responding to the Nether Bone Ruler's cry. Its figure was like a towering banner, millions of zombies crowding around it. The numbers of those crawling out from the ground and coming from the distance in the north was enough to fill the horizon. The drizzle had become heavier, forming a gray curtain between the heaven and earth. Together with the endless undead, a giant web was forming, slowly drawing in toward the city. Du Xiao, don't be ridiculous. Advisor Zhu hauled Senior Hunter Du Xiao back. The 3 leaders, Zhu Meng, Fei Zhao, and Lu Shu, were in a bad shape, like all the others. They did not even have the chance to treat their injuries. The Phantom Tyrant Emperor was only a small ruler among the undead, yet it took 4 of them to barely kill it, at the cost of severe injuries. Meanwhile, the Nether Bone Ruler was a lot stronger than the Phantom Tyrant Emperor. Even at full strength, they had little chance of defeating it, let alone when they were all worn out and injured. Now the mountain zombie was around 50 kilometers away, too. That was the real big ruler. That guy is most likely from the same era as the black totem snake. Listen to the orders from higher up. Immediately retreat to the barrier inside the city. Any of us dying here will result in 10 times the casualties in the future. Zhu Meng displayed his calm as a councilman. However, the veins on his fist were knotted. He was the initiator of the threat elimination strategy, yet he was totally unaware of this disaster before it had happened. How was this possible? Why were the undead able to move freely in the daytime, and there are more of them than at night? So many undead have appeared out of nowhere. Does this mean the king of the kingdom of undead has risen? The thing that has been asleep for thousands of years just happened to rise today. Zhu Meng, Mo Fan called out to Councilman Zhu Meng with a stern face. You should run too. Leave the walls. Let's hope that the barrier is enough to protect us this time. Zhu Meng let out a sigh. He seemed very old all of a sudden. It had been so long since so many undead appeared close to the ancient capital. They should have expected this to happen when the undead had been misbehaving lately, yet they were hoping it was only a coincidence. Where could the people run to during a purple alert? What chance did they have to survive? Even the magicians had trouble staying alive with the god of death hunting them down, let alone the commoners. Even if he wanted to step forward bravely to save the residents on the streets, he sometimes did not even have the right to die a martyr's death, because of his position. He had to stay alive, or the people would lose all hope. I know I should be running, but I have to tell you what I feel. Mo Fan lowered his voice. His face was harder than ever before. Go ahead, said Zhu Meng with a deep look. Bo City, you must know I come from Bo City. I don't care if you believe me or not, but I can smell the Black Vatican. Mo Fan said coldly. The Black Vatican? Why so? Zhu Meng was astounded. The rain, said Mo Fan. Zhu Meng was startled. The rain? Was he saying that the undead were only able to remain active in the sunlight because of the rain that had just started not long ago? The ancient capital had been drenched in rain before, yet he never heard the undead would turn so wild. Chapter 608 City in Grave Danger. I don't know how the Black Vatican did it, but it's exactly the same method they used on Bo City. It happened out of nowhere, and it was during a heavy rain too, enraging all the demon creatures. Perhaps you might think that the rain was just a coincidence, but I think they are related. Something like this doesn't happen for no reason. Natural disasters like these must have a human conspiracy behind them, said Mo Fan. The ancient capital had been safe for so many years. Mo Fan would not believe that the current century was this full of disasters. If it wasn't because God wanted to punish humans, then it must be some sort of conspiracy aiming to lead mankind to destruction. Mo Fan admitted that he had no proof to justify his statement. He was only following his instincts. However, after the calamity of Bo City, and being involved in the Black Vatican's conspiracy once, if he hadn't held on to the underground holy spring that the Black Vatican desperately wanted to acquire, they would still be hidden in the dark among the people. No one could have torn their mask off. Come with us, otherwise you might not make it to the inner walls safely. Zhu Meng believed Mo Fan's words. Not long ago, Zhu Meng had spent some time trying to learn what the Black Vatican was up to. They had been behaving strangely in many places across the nation, yet they were extremely quiet here around the ancient capital, as if they had been wiped out, just like the Magic City. However, the quieter they were, the more likely it was that they were up to something, as they were so cautious that they could not allow any of their blue deacons or gray priests to leak their conspiracy. Mo Fan shook his head. He did not tell Zhu Meng about his experience just so Zhu Meng would bring him along. He was only hoping that his information would help the higher-ups to make the right call. Then why are you staying here? The army of undead is going to overrun the outer walls soon. Everything outside of the inner walls barrier is lost. The purple alert means that even magicians cannot survive inside the barrier. Zhu Meng grabbed Mo Fan up. It was clear that he was going to bring Mo Fan along with brute force. I still have some friends in City North. I'll withdraw to the barrier with them, Mo Fan said sternly. Zhu Meng loosened his grip when he saw the determined look in Mo Fan's eyes. I'll send someone. It's fine, I can take care of them myself. Your men are precious now. Go and save the people you should. The effort I've put in over these years isn't just so I can do nothing in a disaster like what happened to Bo City, said Mo Fan. Yao Nan stood beside Mo Fan. He glanced at Mo Fan and said, "It's true that the people of Bo City are extremely courageous when anyone mentions the Black Vatican. We still don't know if they are involved," said Mo Fan. "It's very likely. The information that the Clearsky Hunter Agency has collected trying to hunt Salin down all leads here to ancient capital, but we were too late." Yao Nan tapped Mo Fan on the shoulder, and came to a realization. Who would have thought that it would turn out like this? I've been hearing how scary the Red Cardinal Salin is, and now when standing on these walls that will be overrun by the army of undead soon. I'm afraid I will never forget the name. Salin. Mo Fan repeated the name, thinking deeply. It was not the first time he heard it. My energy hasn't recovered yet. I won't be able to help. See you on the inner walls, said Yao Nan to Mo Fan. See you in the walls. The truth was, many people were also telling each other they would see them on the walls. The magicians had gathered together to secure a victory for the battle, yet they were going to lose half of the city. Everyone had people they wanted to look for in the chaos. Instead of losing hope here, they would rather head out as soon as possible. Therefore, the few words were all that mattered. It was a blessing, a hope, but more like bidding farewell. In addition to the northern walls, the same purple alert was sounded in 3 other directions. The outer walls could not hold any longer. After all, the outer walls were surrounding the whole city. It was difficult to defend all directions at the same time due to its wide area. On top of that, the number of undead had long surpassed that of the living. If they continued to hold their positions on the walls, everyone would be devoured and surrounded by the sea of undead. When the purple alert was sounded, it meant everyone was required to retreat back to the barrier as fast as possible. Mo Fan remembered that during a blood alert, the commoners basically had 0 chance of surviving outside the barrier. Even magicians would have trouble surviving. Run! The whole ancient capital had come to an agreement that they should retreat and flee for their lives. Every city had a last line of defense, its barrier. The ancient capital's barrier was the inner walls, with a perimeter of 14 kilometers. Above the densely packed streets and zones, one could barely see the golden flicker from the barrier above the inner walls. Meanwhile, Mo Fan could see people in the form of black dots fleeing toward the inner walls. The roads were jammed with vehicles, and helicopters were in the sky providing assistance. Bo City was even smaller than the city north of the ancient capital. The city had been around for centuries. Its population was almost 100 times that of Bo City. And now, the entire population was racing against time. How many of them would reach the inner walls before they were devoured by the army of undead? The sound of the ground quaking mixed with the shocking cries and swept from behind like a storm. Not many people dared to turn around. The number of undead was a lot greater than what the magicians had imagined. The force generated from their march toward the city alone was enough to set the walls and buildings on the verge of collapse. Mo Fan summoned his courage and turned around to take a glance. Black, white, gray, zombies, corpse generals, skeletons, skeleton generals, phantoms, and phantom generals covered the entire area densely. The ground was trembling as they moved. Creatures of enormous size stood out among the undead. Anyone could easily see them in the black tide of undead, like a crane in a flock of chickens. The tide consisting of zombies, phantoms, and skeletons would split in half and continue flowing around them as if they were reefs in a river. The most terrifying sight was still the nether bone ruler circling around in the air, who had destroyed the walls with a single breath of death. It was an intelligent creature, fully focused on destroying the walls that were stopping its people from entering the city. A few kilometers of the northern walls had collapsed. The towers crumbled to the ground one after another. The line of defense that humans had relied on to protect them could not withstand a single blow from it. Mo Fan had no idea what terrifying creatures had appeared in the other directions, but from Zhu Meng, Du Xiao, Fei Zhao, and the others' terrified expressions, he could tell that the skeleton ruler was still not the most terrifying creature. The actual creature that had forced the super magicians to run for their lives was the mountain giant zombie that was capable of commanding all undead. The creature was standing in the midst of the tide of undead like a mountain. Its eyes, so high and proud in the sky, were emitting an icy glow, staring at the city that was in grave danger a few dozen kilometers away.